The bells have tolled beneath a sky veiled in winter gray, their solemn echoes rolling across frostbitten hills like a warning rather than a celebration. Within the towering cathedral, Duke Adrien stood unmoving at the altar, his sharp features set in a mask of indifference that had earned him whispers throughout the realm. At 26, he was already a legend, feared for his unyielding resolve, respected for his command, and by none who dared to know him. His gaze, cold and distant as the northern seas, never lingered on the guests gathered in hushed reverence. To him, the wedding was not a union of hearts but a calculated alliance, forged to preserve power and secure stability. Lady approached with measured grace, her ivory gown trailing softly across the marble floor. At 23, she possessed a quiet elegance that drew admiration without demanding attention. Though her family's fortunes had waned, her upbringing had instilled dignity, kindness, and resilience. Her golden brown eyes held neither defiance nor fear, only a gentle resolve shaped by sacrifice. She understood the necessity of this marriage. Her acceptance was not born of but of courage. As she neared the altar, she lifted her gaze to meet her future husband, hoping for the faintest trace of warmth. She found none, yet she did not falter. Their vows were exchanged with flawless precision, each word spoken clearly but devoid of emotion. When Adrien slid the ring onto her finger, his touch was brief and impersonal, like a noble sealing a contract. Responded with calm composure, her steady voice masking the uncertainty trembling within her heart. Applause filled the cathedral, but the sound felt hollow, echoing against stone walls as lifeless as the Duke's expression. As they turned to face their subjects, sensed that she was stepping not into a new life but into a silent, frozen world. The journey to castle carried them through vast plains blanketed in snow. Villagers gathered along the road, bowing deeply as their new duchess passed, their eyes curious and hopeful, offered gentle smiles in return, touched by their sincerity. Adrien, seated across from her in the carriage, remained absorbed in official documents, his silence unbroken. The rhythmic clatter of hooves filled the space between them, an unspoken barrier that neither crossed. Though she longed to speak, she chose restraint, determined not to intrude upon a man who seemed resolute in his distance. At dusk, the castle emerged upon a jagged cliff, its obsidian spires piercing the dim horizon. Was magnificent yet forbidding, its towering walls steeped in shadows that whispered of loneliness. As the carriage halted, servants lined the courtyard in perfect formation, bowing in synchronized respect. Adrien stepped forward without offering his arm, leaving to descend alone. The winter wind tugged at her veil, but she held her head high, refusing to allow humiliation to steal her composure. Inside, candlelight flickered along endless corridors adorned with ancestral portraits. Their stern gazes seemed to measure her worth as she passed. The air smelled faintly of polished wood and cold stone, untouched by warmth or laughter. Adrien addressed the assembled staff with curt efficiency, his voice commanding obedience. When he introduced as their duchess, his tone was formal, stripped of affection. She acknowledged the servants with a gracious nod, earning subtle smiles from those unaccustomed to kindness. That evening, a grand dining hall awaited them, its long mahogany table gleaming beneath crystal chandeliers. A lavish feast had been prepared, yet the atmosphere felt austere, as though joy had been banished from its walls. Took her place beside Adrien, hopeful that the shared meal might offer a beginning. For a moment, silence settled between them, heavy but expectant. Adrien set down his glass and regarded her with cool detachment. "You will dine in the kitchen," he said, his voice calm and unwavering. "Not with me." The words struck with the force of winter's wind. A murmur rippled among the servants before dissolving into stunned quiet. His fingers tightened gently around her napkin, but she did not allow her composure to fracture. She met his gaze, searching for a trace of cruelty, yet found only indifference. "If that is your wish, your grace," she replied softly, her voice steady despite the ache blossoming within her chest. Without protest, she rose from her seat, her dignity intact. Each step toward the kitchen echoed through the cavernous hall, a testament to her silent strength. Adrien watched her depart unmoved, though something unfamiliar stirred faintly in the recesses of his guarded heart. The kitchen was warm, filled with the comforting aroma of freshly baked bread. Startled servants scrambled to prepare a place for their new duchess, their expressions tinged with sympathy, offered them a gentle smile, easing their unease. "Please do not trouble yourselves," she said kindly. "I am grateful to share your table." Her humility astonished them. As she sat among them, she listened to their stories, thanked them for their efforts, and praised the meal with sincere appreciation. Laughter, tentative at first, soon flickered to life. In that humble space, warmth replaced the chill she had left behind. High above, Adrien dined alone in silence. Yet as the distant murmur of quiet voices drifted upward, he found himself inexplicably aware of her absence. Later that night, stood by her chamber window, gazing at the moonlit snow. The castle remained silent, vast and unyielding, but her resolve burned gently within her heart. She would endure not for duty alone, but for hope, the fragile promise that even the coldest winter could yield to spring. Unseen in the corridor beyond, the cold Duke paused outside her door, listening to the faint whisper of her quiet prayer. Morning light filtered through the frost-laced windows of castle, casting pale gold patterns upon the cold stone floors. Lady awoke to the distant toll of bells and the murmured bustle of servants beginning their duties. Though the previous night's humiliation lingered like a bruise upon her heart, she rose with quiet determination, refusing to allow sorrow to dictate her place within the duchy. She dressed simply yet elegantly, her soft blue gown reflecting both grace and restraint, and prepared to greet a world that had offered her little warmth. Instead of seeking the grand dining hall, she made her way to the kitchen, where the comforting aroma of bread and simmering broth welcomed her. The servants paused in surprise as she entered, their expressions uncertain, but her gentle smile dissolved their unease. She thanked them for their efforts, offering assistance where she could, and her humility soon transformed awkward silence into genuine warmth. Though she had been banished from her husband's table, she chose not to retreat into bitterness. Instead, she cultivated kindness in the very place meant to diminish her. Over the following days, presence brought subtle yet undeniable change. She learned the names of the staff, listened to their concerns, and ensured that their work was acknowledged with gratitude rather than indifference. She requested warmer cloaks for those laboring in the winter chill and arranged for the kitchens to distribute surplus bread to impoverished villagers beyond the castle gates. Her actions were neither grand nor boastful, yet they carried a quiet strength that resonated throughout. Word of the Duchess's compassion soon reached the town below. Mothers whispered blessings in her name, and children waved eagerly when her carriage passed through the snow-dusted streets. Returned their greetings with warmth, her presence offering hope to those who had long lived under the stern rule of the cold duke. Though she possessed no authority of her own, she wielded kindness as her silent influence, reshaping the duchy not through command but through care. From the shadows of his study, Duke Adrien observed these developments with measured curiosity. Reports from his steward spoke not of extravagance or impropriety, but of charity, efficiency, and growing loyalty among the servants. He found himself unsettled by the contrast between rumor and reality. He had expected resentment or ambition, yet displayed neither. Instead, she carried herself with quiet dignity, never challenging his authority nor seeking his attention. One afternoon, while reviewing documents, Adrien paused upon hearing faint laughter drifting through the corridor. Drawn by an unfamiliar impulse, he followed the sound to the open doors of the courtyard. There, beneath a pale winter sun, he found distributing warm loaves of bread to villagers who had gathered at the gates. Her smile was gentle, her words sincere, and the gratitude she received was unfeigned. She neither sought recognition nor displayed pride, she simply offered kindness as naturally as breathing. Adrien remained hidden, watching in silence. Something stirred within him, an emotion he could neither name nor dismiss. He told himself it was mere curiosity, yet her presence lingered in his thoughts long after he returned to his study. For the first time in years, the fortress he had built around his heart showed the faintest trace of a fracture. That evening, he entered the dining hall to find a meal prepared with exceptional care. The aroma was rich, comforting, and unfamiliar in its warmth. After tasting a spoonful of the stew, he paused, surprised by its delicate balance of flavors. Turning to the steward, he asked curtly, "Who prepared this?" The steward bowed. "Her Grace, Your Excellency. The Duchess has taken an interest in ensuring the kitchens meet the needs of both staff and court." Adrien set down his spoon, momentarily silent. He offered no reply, yet he finished the meal without distraction, his thoughts lingering upon the woman he had so deliberately cast aside. Later that night, as snow drifted softly against the windows, Adrien crossed paths within the corridor. She carried a basket of freshly prepared tonics for an ailing maid. When she noticed him, she lowered her gaze respectfully. "Your Grace," she said gently. He regarded her with his customary composure, yet his voice lacked its usual chill. "You tend to matters beyond your station." "I only fulfill my duty," she replied. "A home prospers when kindness is shared among all who dwell within it." Her words, simple yet sincere, lingered in the quiet air. Adrien studied her face, expecting reproach or resentment, but found only calm sincerity. She neither demanded acknowledgement nor sought approval. In that moment, he sensed an unfamiliar disquiet, as though her presence illuminated the loneliness he had long concealed. "You need not concern yourself with such matters," he said, though his tone held less authority than before. Inclined her head, "As you wish, Your Grace, yet compassion costs nothing and its rewards endure." Without awaiting his response, she continued down the corridor, her footsteps fading into silence. Adrien remained where he stood, her words echoing within him like the distant chime of bells. Days passed and gradually transformed beneath her quiet influence. The castle no longer felt like a monument to solitude, but a place where warmth dared to exist. Servants carried out their duties with renewed spirit, and the villagers spoke of their duchess with reverence. Though Adrien maintained his distance, he could not deny the change she had wrought. One evening, as twilight painted the sky in shades of violet and silver, Adrien entered the dining hall to find a single candle placed at the far end of the table. Beside it rested a covered dish, accompanied by a handwritten note in delicate script. "May this meal bring comfort after a long day." He hesitated before lifting the lid. The familiar aroma rose to meet him, stirring something deep within his guarded heart. For a long moment he stared at the empty chair across from his own, its silence heavier than ever before. Outside, winter winds whispered against the ancient walls, yet within the flickering candlelight a fragile warmth began to bloom. Adrien took his seat and tasted the meal she had prepared, his thoughts drawn irresistibly to the gentle woman who asked for nothing in return. And for the first time since her arrival, the cold Duke found himself wondering what it might mean to invite his Duchess to dine beside him. Winter loosened its grip upon, yet a quiet tension lingered within its towering walls, as though the castle itself sensed an unspoken change. Weeks had passed since gentle influence began to warm its silent halls, and though Duke Adrien remained outwardly composed, his thoughts had grown increasingly unsettled. He found himself aware of her presence in ways he could neither explain nor ignore. Each act of her kindness pressed against the fortress of his resolve, threatening to unravel the carefully constructed distance he had long maintained. One crisp morning, a sealed letter arrived bearing the royal crest. Adrien broke the wax with measured precision, his sharp eyes scanning its contents. The king would soon visit, accompanied by nobles from across the realm. A grand banquet was to be held in honor of the crown, and the duchy was expected to display its wealth, loyalty, and prestige. The announcement stirred neither excitement nor pride within him. Instead, it awakened a familiar sense of obligation. The event would be flawless, as all matters under his authority were. As preparations commenced, the castle brimmed with activity. Servants polished silver until it gleamed like starlight, while florists arranged winter roses to soften the austerity of the great hall. Oversaw the arrangements with quiet diligence, ensuring that every detail reflected grace rather than ostentation. Her presence lent harmony to the chaos, and even the most anxious attendants found reassurance in her gentle guidance. Adrien observed her from a distance as she inspected the banquet table, her expression serene and thoughtful. She moved with effortless elegance, offering suggestions with kindness rather than command. Despite his reluctance, he could not deny that it had grown brighter under her influence. Yet the memory of betrayal etched deeply into his past restrained him from yielding to sentiment. He reminded himself that affection was a liability and trust a dangerous indulgence. On the eve of the royal visit, approached him in the gallery, her composure unwavering. "Your Grace," she said softly, "the preparations are complete. I trust they meet your expectations." "They do," he replied, his voice even. After a pause, he added, "Ensure that all matters proceed without error." She inclined her head. "Of course, Your Grace." Though she spoke with dignity, a fleeting shadow crossed her eyes, as if she sensed an unspoken boundary she dared not cross. The night of the banquet arrived in a blaze of candlelight and music. Nobles filled the great hall in a dazzling display of silk and jewels, their laughter echoing beneath the vaulted ceiling. When the king entered, Adrien greeted him with measured respect, every movement precise and controlled. At his side, an empty chair remained conspicuously unoccupied, a silent testament to his continued distance from his wife. Stood beyond the threshold, clad in a gown of shimmering silver that mirrored the glow of moonlight. She had prepared every detail of the evening, yet she waited in quiet uncertainty, unsure whether she was meant to participate or remain unseen. The steward approached her hesitantly. "Your Grace," he murmured, "shall I escort you to the high table?" Before she could respond, Adrien's voice cut through the air. "The Duchess will remain where she is needed." The words were spoken calmly, yet they carried the chill of finality. A murmur rippled through the assembled guests, subtle yet unmistakable. His heart faltered, but she steadied herself with practiced grace. "As you wish, Your Grace," she replied, her tone composed despite the ache that tightened within her chest. She turned away, retreating toward the kitchens where warmth and industry replaced the glittering spectacle of the hall. There she assisted the servants with quiet efficiency, ensuring that each course was delivered flawlessly. No complaint escaped her lips, yet her silence bore the weight of a wounded spirit. Throughout the evening, Adrien felt an unfamiliar restlessness. Though conversation flowed easily among the nobles, his attention drifted toward the empty seat beside him. The laughter around him rang hollow, devoid of the warmth he had glimpsed in his presence. Unable to quell his disquiet, he rose under the pretense of inspecting the preparations and made his way toward the kitchens. As he approached, he heard the soft murmur of voices fade into stillness. Pausing in the doorway, he saw standing alone near the hearth, the glow of the fire illuminating her delicate features. In her hands she held a tray, her composure faltering as a single tear slipped silently down her cheek. She did not sob nor curse her fate, she simply wept in quiet resignation, her sorrow as gentle as her spirit. The sight struck Adrien with unexpected force, piercing the armor he had forged around his heart. For the first time, he understood the depth of her loneliness, a loneliness he had inflicted. Sensed his presence and hastily brushed away her tears, her dignity intact despite her pain. "Your Grace," she said softly, lowering her gaze, "is there anything you require?" He found himself momentarily speechless, confronted by the consequences of his own cruelty. The words he had once spoken with indifference echoed in his mind, now laden with shame. No, he replied quietly, his voice stripped of its usual coldness. She offered a faint, polite smile. Then please return to your guests, the banquet awaits you. As she moved to pass him, Adrien spoke again, his voice low yet unsteady. She paused, surprise flickering across her features as he addressed her by name for the first time. For a heartbeat neither spoke. The distance between them, once vast and impenetrable, felt fragile and uncertain. Adrien searched her eyes, no longer guarded but filled with quiet sorrow and enduring strength. In that moment he realized that her tears had done what no force ever had, they had shattered the silence he had mistaken for strength. Yet the words he longed to speak remained unvoiced. Without another sound, inclined her head and returned to her duties, leaving him standing alone beside the fatting warmth of the hearth. As Adrien watched her disappear into the glow of the kitchen, he understood that the cold walls of his heart had begun to crack, and whether he welcomed it or not, the thaw had already begun. The final notes of music faded through the gilded halls of, yet Duke Adrien remained rooted outside the kitchen, his thoughts echoing louder than the distant laughter of nobles. The image of silent tears lingered before him, dissolving the cold certainty he had worn for years. For the first time, the weight of his actions pressed upon him not as duty but as regret. He had mistaken restraint for strength and distance for dignity, never realizing that cruelty could hide behind indifference. Now, as the warmth of the hearth softened the shadows around him, he felt the sharp sting of remorse. Inside continued her work with gentle composure, directing servants and ensuring the final courses were prepared without flaw. Though her heart ached, she refused to allow sorrow to diminish her grace. She believed that dignity lay not in defiance but in perseverance, and she carried herself with quiet strength. Yet beneath her calm exterior, a fragile hope trembled when she had long tried to silence. Adrien stepped forward, his presence drawing the attention of the staff. At once they bowed and, leaving the Duke and Duchess alone amid the glow of firelight and the lingering aroma of spices, turned, surprise flickering in her eyes as she met his gaze. Your Grace, she said softly, her voice steady despite the vulnerability she felt, is there something you require? For a moment Adrien could not speak. The words he had long suppressed rose to his lips, unfamiliar and difficult. Yes, he said at last, his tone subdued, your forgiveness. His breath caught, her composure wavering. She searched his face, uncertain whether she had heard him correctly. My lord. He drew closer, the sternness of his expression softened by sincerity. I have wronged you, he confessed. From the moment you entered this castle, I treated you as a burden rather than my wife. I believed that distance would protect me, but it has only revealed my own cruelty. She listened in silence, her heart stirred by the vulnerability she had never expected to witness. I feared trust, he continued, his voice low. I feared betrayal, and so I built walls of ice around myself, yet your kindness has shown me the emptiness of that existence. Tonight I saw your tears and I realized they were not born of resentment but of loneliness I caused. For that I am deeply ashamed. Sighs glistened, though her gaze remained unwavering. I never sought to burden you, your grace. I wished only to fulfill my duty with honor. You have done far more than that, Adrien replied. You have brought warmth to a place long ruled by silence. You have given compassion to those I overlooked and dignity to a home that had forgotten its humanity. You deserved respect, yet I offered you exile. The sincerity in his voice pierced her guarded heart. Why tell me this now, she asked gently. Because I can no longer bear the weight of my own indifference, he said, and because I wish to make amends not as a duke but as your husband. He extended his hand, his gesture both tentative and resolute. Will you join me at the high table, not as an obligation but as my equal? Emotion trembled in her chest, fragile yet radiant. She studied his face, searching for any trace of insincerity, but found only earnest regret and newfound resolve. Slowly, she placed her hand in his. If this is truly your wish, your grace, then I will stand beside you. It is not merely my wish, he said softly, it is my honor. Together they returned to the great hall, their joined hands drawing murmurs from the assembled nobles. Conversations hushed as they approached the high table, the glow of candlelight reflecting in their eyes. Adrien guided to the seat beside his own and addressed the court with unwavering authority. My lords and ladies, he declared, his voice resonant and clear, allow me to present my Duchess Lady. From this day forward she shall stand at my side, honored as my equal and cherished as the heart of this duchy. A wave of astonishment rippled through the hall, followed by respectful applause. The king himself inclined his head in approval, recognizing the sincerity of the moment. Felt warmth blossom within her as she took her rightful place, no longer hidden in shadow but illuminated by dignity and acceptance. As the banquet resumed, laughter and music filled the hall with renewed life. Adrien found himself watching as she conversed with grace and kindness, her presence transforming the atmosphere into one of harmony. For the first time, he felt not the burden of duty but the quiet joy of companionship. Later, beneath the soft glow of chandeliers, he leaned toward her. I once believed solitude was strength, he murmured. Now I see it was merely fear. Met his gaze with a gentle smile. Even the coldest winter yields to spring, your grace. Then call me Adrien, he said quietly, for I wish to be more than your duke. A faint blush colored her cheeks. As you wish, Adrien. In the days that followed, blossomed beneath their united guidance. Together, they improved the lives of their people, blending wisdom with compassion. The servants who had once whispered in pity now spoke with admiration, and the villagers hailed their duchess as a beacon of hope. One evening, as twilight painted the sky in hues of rose and gold, Adrien prepared a private dinner in the grand hall. Candles flickered upon the polished table, their warm glow reflecting a future no longer burdened by silence. As entered, her eyes widened in quiet wonder. This is for you, he said gently. No longer will you dine alone, nor in the shadows, you belong here beside me. Emotion shimmered in her gaze as she took her seat. Thank you, she whispered, not for the grandeur, but for your heart. He reached across the table, clasping her hand with tender devotion. You melted the ice within me. What began as duty has become my deepest truth. I love you. Tears of joy glistened in her eyes, and I love you, Adrien. Beyond the windows, the last traces of winter yielded to the promise of spring, and laughter once more echoed through. Where silence had reigned, warmth now flourished, and the cold duke who had banished his bride to the kitchen gave her not only a seat at his table, but a home within his heart forever.